Welcome to the Esoteric Worlds. I'm Chakri, hypnotherapist and medium. Today, I'm sharing with you a new experience from my journey. Open your mind and let's dive together into the invisible worlds. Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Esoteric Worlds. Today, I'm going to talk about a topic that, in my life, was a turning point, something that opened my eyes to so many things, especially spirituality. It's about NDEs, near-death experiences, also known as EMI in French, expérience de mort imminente. This is a topic that's been discussed from many different angles on the internet. I'd like to approach it from a slightly different angle, I would say. That is to say, as with every episode, we're going to start by defining what an NDE, a near-death experience, actually is, but also what death is, what can be considered death, and what doctors consider as someone being dead. We're going to agree on this definition. Then I'd also like to look at the impact this kind of experience has had on people who have gone through it, but also the impact it might have on your own life. After listening to this episode, the awareness you might gain, the answers you'll find, or maybe even the new questions that will come up for you afterwards. The impact it will have on you is just as important. And of course, I'll wrap up with a conclusion. And in this particular case, I didn't start from the testimonies you find here and there, but rather I started from the testimony of two people close to me. One was a patient I had in therapy, and the other was a close friend who also experienced an NDE. So a near-death experience, by definition, is when a person is declared clinically dead and then comes back to life. During this experience, some people report memories and share their stories, while others don't dare to talk about it. That happens too. To avoid being seen as crazy, maybe only a third of them actually share their memories and talk about it. So we're going to focus on those people. Many say they've seen the tunnel. Some say they've seen beings of light. Some have seen prophets or angels. And others say they saw their whole life flash before their eyes. Like a purgatory. So now, before we go any further into this topic, I'm also going to define what death is. So, clinical death was originally defined by the stopping of the heart, breathing, and blood circulation. That was the first clinical definition, but as medicine improved, it became possible to keep the body and heart functioning artificially, so blood circulation, the heart, and the lungs could be maintained. Breathing, everything could be maintained artificially. So now, the real definition is brain death, the cessation of brain function. When the brain stops, that's clinical death. So once we've defined that, there are two types of NDEs. The older NDEs, with the first definition of death, where the brain was still functioning. But the more recent NDEs, where there is actual death, a complete brain shutdown, there can be cardiac arrest, respiratory arrest, and brain arrest. For 30 seconds, a minute, and then the person comes back to life. That's what we're going to define as death in the most precise way. The cessation of everything. Breathing, heart, blood circulation, brain shutdown. At this point, no one can deny that this is death. Afterwards, how people come back to life is a mystery to doctors. Don't count on me to explain it to you. So there you have it. And during this experience of death, we're going to focus on the testimony. For this, I took the testimony of a patient I had in therapy who told me she had an accident. And during this accident, she saw her body in the car. She saw the ambulances arrive. She was almost clinically dead. After that, it's hard to define. Between the arrival of the paramedics and what she saw, whether she was really dead or not, since we didn't have the measuring instruments, but she saw her body. She saw the car. She saw it all. The whole scene from above. Afterwards, they saw that her heart had stopped, they did what was necessary, and she came back to life. But she saw the whole scene from above. She remembers the scene from above. Unlike many others, she didn't see the tunnel. She just saw that scene. And afterwards, when she came back to life, everything seemed dull to her. Everything seemed strange. Everything felt limited, unreal. For her, reality was on the other side. She really had a hard time getting back to her everyday life. In fact, she changed jobs. She was a designer. And when she came to see me, she was in the middle of a career change. She had gotten divorced right after the NDE and settling down. For her, things just weren't working anymore. And what I also notice is that she came back with mediumistic abilities. She had that. She had also a much sharper perception, a much stronger intuition. I always make a distinction between mediumship and intuition. She could sense people much more. Sometimes she could almost see auras. So she came back with other abilities. And I talked about this in the first episode, that people who have a near-death experience often come back with abilities. But her life was turned upside down, and the strongest marker I found in her is that she told me everything we've been told in religions is bullshit and death doesn't exist. She was convinced that death doesn't exist and was no longer afraid of death, or anything else for that matter. So she was really clear about that. For the second case I encountered, it was a close friend who had also a car accident. And during this accident, he saw that someone pulled him out of the car and stole his money. Afterwards, he saw people around him making calls. Emergency services and ambulances were arriving. He saw all of this from the outside as well. And when the emergency responders came, they did what was needed to restart his heart, and he came back to life. However, as for him, he didn't tell the doctor about this experience, so he wouldn't be thought of as crazy. I think I'm the only person he ever talked to about this. I was talking with him about his accident, and since I was familiar with this phenomenon, I wanted to know a bit more. And that's when he told me this story. What you should know is that before his accident, he was very distant from his parents and didn't have any particular affection. It's not that he didn't have any feelings, he was just less sensitive, much less sensitive. And after the NDE, he was much closer to his parents. His relationship with his parents improved significantly. And he developed something quite unusual. It's an intuition. He was really able to see what was going to happen in the future. And this might surprise you, but he was into sports betting. And how I see this statistically is that out of 8 or 10 games, every day he played, he would fill out a betting slip, and he managed to get about 90% of the answers right. That is, out of 10 games, he got 9 right and only 1 wrong. And the probability of that happening almost every day is extremely low. He played every day, sometimes even twice a day, and he often hit that 90% mark, which is pretty incredible. So he developed this intuition that really allowed him to predict certain things, even things in the future. And he became much more perceptive about people. That is, if someone was trying to scam him, he could spot it right away. He could see it coming from a distance. So he could also see entities. He saw the entities that were attached to certain people. He could see that clearly. He would say, this person has an entity. This person is clean. He could see that. So he developed this ability that he didn't have before. So we've seen the impact on these people, on their lives. After this impact, he also completely changed his life in the sense that he changed careers. He went through a professional retraining. He chose a job that was much more people-oriented, much more connected to others. So here we saw the impact on people. But what will interest us, you might be thinking, what is he telling us? He's just telling us their story. But what impact does that have on my life? Let me tell you, it actually has a rather unique impact on your life. You should know that. These testimonials in numbers are huge. I'll let you do your own research. I won't bore you with the numbers. I did my research, but there were so many numbers that I thought, I'll let them handle it. The research. How many testimonials are there? How many people have seen the tunnel? There are numbers, but it's huge. So I'm going to compare these numbers to 3 books, three books that are the three monotheistic books: the Muslim book, the Christian book, and the Jewish book. So in none of these three books, in any of these religions, clearly states these stages of life after death. That is, the tunnel, the loving light, what people have seen, all of that isn't clearly mentioned, which raises the question of the truthfulness of these three religions that contradict each other. In other words, they're like sects, each one pulling people toward itself, for some of them. So that already raises the question of truthfulness. Then there's another question that comes up. If these people, I forgot to mention that the second person also was no longer afraid of death after coming back to life. After his NDE, he really wasn't afraid of death anymore either. You told me that. The religion I had, it's bullshit. Everything they talked about, I didn't see any of that. And I can testify to that because I crossed over to the other side. Then the question we can ask is about the truthfulness of monotheistic religions. I haven't looked into the other religions. As for me, I always say, I don't know where the truth is, but I know where the lie is. Now, just imagine that all the listeners, thanks to near-death experiences, to these millions of testimonies, to these millions of life changes, to people who learn to listen to their souls after these NDEs, after these near-death experiences. Imagine that because of all this, we could listen to our soul, change our lives, but also no longer be afraid of death. Imagine the impact on the system that terrorizes us with death, whether it's the political system or religion, all religions included, which give us a terrifying image of death. But death is just a passage. It's simply a door to another world. After that, I would say there are two types of atheists. There are 100% materialist atheists. So when the body disappears, everything disappears with it. And then there are spiritual atheists who say the body disappears, but my consciousness, my soul remains, will reincarnate or go somewhere else. That's why I also distinguish between two types of atheists. To sum it all up, a few months ago, I met an old Vietnamese man. I was in the city of Da Lat in Vietnam, and I was walking in the forest, in the mountains, and I met an old Vietnamese man, 82 years old. He was in great shape. He spoke French. That surprised me. He spoke to me in French, and we started talking. And he's a practicing Christian. He visited Switzerland. He visited quite a few European countries. We talked about everything and anything. Travel, Vietnam, Europe. And then we got onto the topic of religion. He told me that he is a believer, that he is Christian, and I told him about NDEs. He said to me, "So you have the truth?" I told him, "I don't have the truth, and actually neither do you, and those who have had NDEs don't have the truth either. Because the real truth? Those who have it aren't here to testify about it. They're on the other side." So that leaves a big question mark. It doesn't make things any easier for you. But right now, no one holds the truth, because everyone who has it has gone to the other side. I wanted to end this episode with that question. That's all for this episode of Esoteric Worlds. If you enjoyed it, subscribe, like, and share. Thank you. See you soon for new adventures.